understand karma in a literal sense. If you do something good happens. If you do something bad happens. That's a simplistic view of the reality of karma. Karma, the larger truth of karma is that, so within me exists all the past family generations that preceded me. So that is true for my parents. So my parents brought a lot of suffering out of their family systems, which manifested itself in a lot of family violence. My father was a soldier in the Second War. He never spoke about his service. He never spoke truthfully about it. He told some heroic stories and some drunken stories, but it wasn't really the truth of service and how he was affected by that. My mother was very volatile. She was very young. My mother was 17 when I was born. She turned 18 days after I was born. And she was very volatile and very unpredictable. I don't know if this was because of the medication she was taking or because she was living with a person who was, in some ways, my father was some ways not really available. It's hard to tell, but there was a lot of tension and a lot of expressions of violence, fighting, arguing. I remember in the mornings getting ready for breakfast, and there would be something said, and then there would be an argument, and there would be doors slammed, and maybe a dish broke in the sink. I remember one time my mother threw the coffee pot at my father. Plus, so there was the family dynamic. And then you move out into the larger society and culture. I grew up in a small rural farming community in western Pennsylvania, northwestern Pennsylvania, small town named Waterford. I was a 3-sport athlete, and I was really I was a good athlete. I would say 60 to 80% of the men my father's age who lived in the community where I grew up had also been soldiers in the Second War. And this generation was conditioned to not deal with how profoundly they were affected, by and large. Some transcended that, but by and large. Two of my football coaches were combat veterans. My baseball coach was a combat veteran. My wrestling coach was a combat veteran. 3 of them served in the Second War, and 1 of them served in the Korean War. And so the suffering that they carried from that was transported into their work as athletic coaches. So I was being conditioned from a very young age into a false narrative about the truth of war. So the war before the war.
Right.
And then, as I've written, I joined the military, and when I was 17, I was actually not yet old enough to sign a contract, so my father had to sign for me.
But may I stop you right there and just say,
Sure.
that's where I wanted to say one thing about that so the war before the war. You did mention you played a lot of sports, and by the way, I believe my mother's 3. I have a photograph of her 3. Now, whether they were combat veterans, 2 were World War II, and 1 was my mother's 86. 2 were World War II, and 1 was Korea, the Korean War. But I always remember my mother saying, "Don't ask too many questions."
Yes.
Yeah, but they had certain quote unquote war stories they would tell, their adventures. So I understand what you mean by that. They had how they could tell their stories about the war, but there were certain things you weren't to ask. So they had that glorified version of the war. So that really made sense to me when you talked about it, not from me being there, but from that experience of how my uncles handled that. And then that home life you talked about also in the book, that the difference between rage and anger, and to not totally get you off track, but you said rage. Could you explain that? Because a lot of people, I think, maybe don't know how to deal with that rage versus anger, and it really hit me. It was powerful to me what you said about rage and anger.
The majority of people don't know the difference between rage and anger. Rage is this huge ball of unaddressed feelings that's just waiting to explode. I think that would have been an explanation of my mother's behavior. That would be an explanation of my father's behavior on occasion. It would be an explanation of my behavior, because of course I am simply a manifestation of the behaviors that were modeled for me in my family and in the social context that I had. So I think commonly we see expressions of rage that we call anger. It's not really anger. It could be deep sadness. It could be confusion. It could be a profound sense of fear that we just don't have access to because we're conditioned not to have these feelings.
Right. And so back to the war, and you were so young, you kind of you wrote a letter or talked to them into letting you sign up for the war, or sign up for the army, right?
Yes.
Because you were a little bit young, you were 17, and you went with this really hit me, with your Boy Scout suitcase that had your name written in magic marker.
Yep.
And you drove to the station, and you want to tell us about that, how your father left you at that point?
Yes. So the Boy Scout suitcase, Boy Scout colors, brown and tan. And on the outside of the suitcase, I had my full name, and I had my military serial number. I already had that. So I wrote those on the suitcase. My father, I wasn't, in a manner of speaking, I wasn't talked into joining. But it's also true that everything that I was exposed to growing up was shaping that conditioning where when I thought I was joining, it was really an already foregone conclusion that that's what I would do. My father drove me to the bus station in Erie, Pennsylvania. He dropped me off. Let's see, I actually, I don't remember whether I already had a ticket or we had to go get a ticket. But in any event, once I had my ticket in hand, my father said goodbye to me, turned around, walked away, got in the car, and left. He didn't give me a hug. He didn't give me a kiss. He didn't wave at me, nothing. He just said goodbye, turned around, and left.
That is, do you think that was his way of handling his sadness, or he just was that he was that kind of person? That was a coldness to him. I mean, what do you?
I really wouldn't want to speculate. Although that is a really viable hypothesis. He didn't know how to deal with the loss. He didn't know how to deal with the transition. He didn't know how to deal with the feelings that he may have been carrying, knowing that I was going off to the military. When I enlisted in the military in 1965, Vietnam was happening, but it wasn't yet that massive escalation of the war. That happened shortly after I came in. So I don't know if the notion that I might go to war was on his radar.
Right.
But I think your speculation is not far off the mark, but in truth, I don't really know.
Right. That is just like as you say in the book, some things are just rhetorical because we just don't know. We're just speculating on certain things. So then you go and you're in war. So then there's the war within the war. And you might want to get to this later, but there was something that just hit me so strongly. If you want to tie this in, and I will give you a chance to talk, Roger, but I just love this. But everyone has their Vietnam. So you got to war, and you want to tell us whatever you want to share about that part of the war.
Well, I can do it quite. I'll do it quite literally. So you mentioned that your mother's brothers, three of them, were in the military. You don't know if they were in combat or not, but the message was, don't talk about certain things. Um, what I also really, I really put an emphasis on the transgenerational impacts of war, violence, and suffering. So even though people, especially because people are not openly working with how they were affected, they aren't openly working with how they were affected and how that may be showing itself or influencing their decisions in their life, how it's shaping their actions. Nonetheless, those nonetheless that is happening. So the way they are living their lives, being influenced by the causes and conditions of their life, especially coming out of the military, then your mother and you have being exposed to them are influenced. So that stuff is transmitted to us. The stuff meaning their adaptive character traits.
Yes. Yeah, that makes sense. So, while you were there in the war, we know. What would you like to say about? Well, let me ask one more question about that. So, if our karma goes through our family, how far do you take that as us being one collective, everyone being as one collective? How far do you take, you personally, or as you teach, would you say that as humankind?
Well,
And
one of the things that has become pressingly clear to me is that within me exist all those family generations endlessly back through space and time. Also, what also influences me is the you already mentioned the collective. So there's what I call the collective conscious. The collective conscious I define as the institutions of education, of commerce, of entertainment, of information, of economics. Um, these institutions also, which are the fabric of society, had an influence on how I view the world. So I'm influenced not only the karma that I inherit not only comes from the family lineages, but from the collective of which I'm a part of, and that collective is broken down into the microcosms of the experiences that we're interacting with at any given moment. Now, if we go, I think, where did I read this? If we go back 8 generations, Michelle, you and I are cousins. That's, I think we're all related at some point.
yeah,
But it's also, for me, a larger truth that as, let's see, we are, although we are in form individual, we are in essence interconnected, not only one to the next, but to the environment which sustains us.
right.
So we are part of a larger interconnected whole. We're just a part of that. And that's been really a crucial piece of what I've discovered through this practice and how that influences my actions in the world.
Right. That's something that I've really been working on through the book that I wrote, and just I really didn't understand until I dug in. I would throw terms around, and I would misuse terms, and I probably do sometimes misuse terms, but I'm learning. And I would talk about the connectiveness of all, the connective and the collective, and how, you mentioned, the bee that pollinates, and all, how we're all connected, everything's connected. And I used to just kind of be very uncaring, very selfish about all that, and that is changing as I, develop and learn more. And that selfishness was when I was much younger. I'm still selfish in many, many ways. Don't get me wrong, but I'm learning and growing and seeing how every single thing affects everything else, and
Yes.
and everything is so connected. So one other thing that I thought was I just wanted to get back to is before you mentioned that you really didn't know that much or care that much about politics. Now, I want to know if you still feel the same way. You said something in your book, the Vietnam Hell's Gate book. You said, I also didn't know much about politics. I'm quoting, "It wasn't part of my life. Now I understand how important it is to know what is going on in the world. Though no long-term solutions to our world's problems are achieved through political ideologies, I am impacted by them, as is each of us, and a dear price is paid because of this kind of ignorance." Do you still feel the same way?
Absolutely.
Because there's so many people who will say, I don't want to talk about politics. I don't get involved in politics. I don't care anything about politics. We hear that so much now, and it's really an easy thing for people to say. And I found that very interesting that you made that point in that book that was written in 2004, I believe, if I'm correct. And that's such a big issue now that people really don't think that's that important.
Well, it's not that it's not that important.
Okay.
Because as it was written in the book, it is important for me to be informed. But for example, peace is not peace is not a political process. There's not a political solution that will bring us to some conscious reality of the existence of peace or the manifestation of peace,
Right.
because peace is not an ideology. And
Correct.
and
I get you.
I still see so many people locked into, we see it on the world stage today. People are entrenched in their ideological perspectives, and they use those ideological perspectives to create separation in the denial of the coexisting reality that we live in. And they use the mind is used to shape the world in a way that gives them the illusion of protection, that they can do whatever they want, and that their ideology protects them, or that they know what's right for the whole. And in fact, I don't know what's right for the whole. The whole knows what's right for the whole,
Right.
and I need to become conscious of my ideological perspectives so that I can begin to allow the world to inform me instead of me attempting to get the world to conform to my ideas. I always look to see where am I connected to the other, not where I am separate. And often I see the realm of ideologies, whether they're philosophical, religious, or political, they are used as instruments of creating specialness and separateness.
Right.
And I hope to, and we need to transcend that.
Right. To start with what we can agree on. I think it was His Holiness the
We don't
Dalai
even have to
Lama who
agree.
said
Where
that.
do we connect?
Well, I think it was His Holiness the Dalai Lama in the SMU basketball stadium. I might have heard him wrong, but in the nosebleed sections, I believe I heard him say, find that for something at least. Why don't we start at least with something upon which we can somewhat agree instead of always starting where we are divided? And he giggled when he said it. And he said, because we tend to start, I find this true, we tend to, in discussion, start where we are divided. And we, instead of finding the maybe one thing where we can come to some bit of a meeting of the minds. Maybe I'm not saying it perfectly right, but that seems like that would be a better way to start, at least. I wouldn't want to misquote him, but that's what I heard from the nosebleed section of the basketball stadium. So, yeah, and it was wonderful to be there. All right.
So, what are some of the turning points you had to find healing and transformation after the war?
The first, and for me, the first and one of the most important was that I the way I wasn't dealing with of how I was affected by the war and how that was influencing my life and my relations and my movements through the world. I was following in the steps of my father and what was modeled by him and the men in the community where I grew up. They were using social anesthetics to put a blanket over their suffering in an effort to keep it at a distance. Um, I was doing the same. I used alcohol, and unlike my dad, not like my father, but I used alcohol like my father. But unlike my father, I also used other drugs. So I had a I had a significant drug and alcohol problem. I had to stop drinking alcohol and taking other drugs, and I had to stay stopped because as long as I'm taking intoxicants, there was not the possibility to for the feelings the suffering that I was carrying to begin to show itself to me. That I would say was one of the primary turning points, to stop and stay stopped. Once that happened, and and I couldn't stay stopped without the support of other like-minded people, and without the support. And as my suffering was beginning to show itself to me, then I had the help of people in the therapeutic community, and all of that led me then to the first meditation retreat, which was in a holistic center in upstate New York.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. Well, through that, the journey of that, we won't go because of time, but it's you eventually you weren't, and correct my language here, I'm not going to probably get it exactly right, but instead of being an in monastery monk, you were decided to be one that was not in monastery, and that was a bit of a journey too for you, right?
Yes.
Yes. So that's where you then were able to reach out and go and do walk and go and help so many others that were in combat. And I saw it read in the book, where you went to Cambodia. There's a picture of you holding a little girl, I believe, in Cambodia, and all the different places where you helped other people in war zones or also other veterans. Yeah. Would you say that is one of the reasons perhaps that you were maybe not in monastery? Is you went out?
What I'll say about that is the monasteries where I studied and trained were institutional, and by the very fact of their institutionalized nature, they were bureaucratic.
I get you.
So people were struggling for position, they were struggling for power. They want, it was all the things that didn't fit for me. So the monastery life, being in a monastery was like being in any other bureaucratic situation, in the job force. It didn't work for me.
Okay.
And that's why when I was invited to become ordained, I said to the person who invited me, I would like to take the vows as they were prescribed in the mid-19th century, and to live my life more directly, a wandering Buddhist monk. The term in the U.S. are not so familiar with the term mendicant. They're more familiar with it in European and Asian cultures because there's more tradition of that. But I'm a mendicant Buddhist monk, which means that I'm not permitted to work in a gainful way. I don't have any of the trappings of retirement or healthcare. I don't have any of those things. By vow, I'm committed to live directly and only on the support of people who encounter what it is that I do and if they find any worth or value in that.
So, with your generation, I'm kind of curious because with your generation, a Buddhist monk's probably not like the most popular thing or even really heard of, right? I mean, it was several years before Kung Fu came out when, he was journeying across kicking everybody's butt. And let's be real. I mean, you did how many years of karate and 12th degree black belt? You're kind of a combat veteran. You're kind of a badass. Let's be real. And you went from that to Buddhist. How did you transition and how did that work going from where you were to being a Buddhist monk?
It went down like that. And I can share a short story about that. I was teaching a course. I had an open session for in one of the schools that I had an open session for people of the rank of black belt and higher. They could come and study one night a week. And one of the exercises that I had them do is I had them all stand in a circle, and then I had one person in the middle of that circle, and then they had to fight everybody in the circle. But it was a non-contact session. Now I had to be there because there's always somebody that wants to try out their stuff. And so if it started to get a little out of hand, it was my responsibility to keep that within the boundaries of how the instructions were given. I was standing outside the circle, and I heard one person talking to another person. They were side by side, and the person looked at him. One person looked at the other and said, I can whip your butt. That's not the language that they use. It's the language I'm using now. I can whip your butt because my style is superior to your style. And there was something happened when I heard that. I went, wait, that's not what I want to be about. Something just clicked. And within 2 days or 3 days of that, I had divested myself of the robes of a martial artist. I gave everything away. I just stopped. I just quit. And within a month, I was in a meditation retreat with a Buddhist monk, and 3 weeks later, I was in a monastery in France. And I can't say any of it was by design or by plan. And it was a process that was unfolding for me as I was beginning to wake up to this truth of conditioning that I spoke about earlier.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I started studying martial arts when I was 14.
14.
And I studied martial arts from the time I was 14 until 1989.
And then I heard you say, because karate's not, what did you said it in one of the videos, that it is designed to be a combat.
Wait, it is a combat.
It is a combat, yeah. But is there one that is more of a meditative, like Tai Chi, or is there any of them that are more meditative type of?
Actually, Tai Chi is also Tai Chi is referred to as a soft style, but it is a combative art. The same as Pakwa, it's another soft style, but it's a combative art. There's I forget what they call it now, Qigong. I don't know if Qigong has its roots in the martial arts or not. I'm not so familiar with it. I'm told that it isn't, and I haven't really done any research about that. But what I hear that Qigong is a movement-based sort of meditation practice originating in China.
Okay. That'd be kind of fun.
I'd like to hear about how I know that there are combat veterans who will listen to this if they're not tonight. I know of some that I plan on listening. If they're not listening tonight, they're going to listen to the recording and to the podcast. and they're struggling. I know this also from returning from combat. What would you say to them?
Um, what I say to them is what was said to me. First, I ask them, I let them know if there's anything I can do to support them, I am at their access. However, you really have to want to do things differently, because if nothing changes, nothing changes. I have to really be willing to establish a more conscious relationship with how I was affected. Um, if I want to be just rid of, if I don't want to have any more memories, if I want to just get over this sleep disturbance that I live with, if I crave to just forget about all of that, it's not going to work. It just won't. I have to learn to live at peace with my unpeacefulness. Healing is not the absence of suffering. It's learning to live in a more conscious relationship with that suffering. And the practice that was passed on to me, that I pass on to others, it's meditation. It's not medication. And so there is a very disciplined approach to it. And it is, and what an individual does with that, it's up to them. If they're willing to invest themselves, if they're willing to engage in these disciplines can support them in finding whatever path it is for them, whatever the path of healing is for them. I don't pretend to know what it is for each and every individual. Right. So I always, since COVID, I haven't been traveling. I used to travel a great deal. And since I've not been traveling in the area where I live, there's a large active duty military community, and there's a large veteran community. And I know on a number of occasions now, since it was discovered that I'm in the area, I've been contacted regarding people who are actively talking suicide. I only get contacted or called when those involved weapons. And because they don't want to call in the police, they're afraid to call in the sort of the institutional kind of ways to deal with these situations. And the only thing I can say to them is that there isn't any cure for this. We can learn to live at peace with our peacefulness if we want to. If we don't want to feel, if we don't want to remember, if we want to just get rid of this stuff, nothing's going to work. And like somebody told me while I was, after I'd just been released from intensive care, after my last overdose in 1983, when they asked me if I was going to do it again. And I said, absolutely. I said, death has to be better than this. And the person looked at me and said, how do you know better? It could be worse. And that really, it was, I don't know if it's true or not true, but it really caught my attention at that time. And I went, holy cow. It was also a point that it was one of those encouraging points that led me in this direction of what's commonly referred to as transformation.
In your latest book, which I did read today, and of course, I don't think it's meant to be necessarily read cover to cover and then put down. It's a working book. It's a working practice, I would say. Bringing meditation to life, 108 teachings on the path of Zen practice. I do want to ask about misconceptions, but let me ask this first. If somebody was really struggling in any area of their life, whether they're a combat veteran or somebody that just really is just miserable in their life in whatever way, if they started with that 5 minutes in the morning And do they have to? I think I know your answer, but do they have to get better before they start with the 5 minutes?
No. I mean, what's better?
Well, right. So I mean, but can you pick up this book and just start in the middle of your perhaps my suffering, which you say it's not to overcome your suffering, it's to, we still may suffer.
Mm-hmm.
Pick up this book and start with the 5 minutes, and just start with 5 minutes in the morning, and you don't have to. What I feel is we don't have to feel like we have to be perfect, what is perfect, to be able to start our practice of meditation. Does that make any sense?
There's a common misconception about meditation practice. A lot of people think, okay, so when I enter into meditation practice, my thoughts will stop. And I keep telling people, if your thoughts stop, you're brain dead. It's not I encourage people, look, it's just about connecting with the breath. Or it's really about realizing what a challenge that is for us. But it's really just about sticking to this, sitting for 5 minutes every morning and every night just to do it. If we're sitting to get something, then we're going to miss what's presented to us because we have our ideas of what's supposed to be happening. We'll miss what's actually happening. What I do encourage people to do is first thing when they get up in the morning is to make their bed like they never slept in it, and then sit for 5 minutes. And then in the evening to repeat that process. This book will not heal people. It will not cure people, nor will meditation. What it does is it opens up. The possibilities that a person can then see that transformation is a reality, that they don't have to live forever stuck in these endless repeating cycles. We can live differently if we're willing to give up our ideas about what that means or how we're supposed to live. So yes.
Yeah. And I love that. I can't read. Yeah, this is just in the first chapter. It's a way of meditation is a way of living. You say, and I quote, "The practice of meditation can be present and support us in all things, in every moment." And I love this, like a life jacket that keeps us from drowning. Without it, we will sink into the sea of samsara. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes, suffering. Samsara is just a fancy word for suffering.
For samsara, the sea of our confusion and suffering. So this is like a life jacket that keeps us from drowning. And you go on. It's really. This is a book where, in my I don't know, Matt, if you can see, like I highlighted almost everything. So this is I found so much that was helpful, but I can highlight it, but of course I have to do it. I have to practice it and do that sitting for 5 minutes. And I do, but I will tell you what I don't always do is the consistency, which you speak about. The consistency.
The consistency is key.
Yeah.
And I will also add to this. So people have this, they're seeking for some kind of transcendence. Mm-hmm. Or they're seeking to get themselves to conform to certain ideas of what they think meditation is supposed to be about, or Zen practice is supposed to be about. And I often say to people, look, if a thing is not practical, it's not spiritual.
That's cool.
You talk about in one of the books. You talked about just washing the dishes.
That's right.
Yeah, just washing the. Just a matter of you just are washing the dishes. Do you remember where I'm sure you do. You wrote it, but just it's a practice. It's just
yes. Yeah. I mean, this right here, this interaction between the three of us. Actually, between the four of us, the one who's not on camera.
He's on. He talks usually. We usually throw him a question, right, Matt?
I'm just hiding back here right now.
You're hiding.
Yes, but this interaction is also a form of meditation. Speaking, listening, working, walking, concentrated on the breath. discovering what prevents us from being concentrated on the breath, from being aware, and not so much conscious, but being aware of the breath, breathing in, knowing that I'm breathing in, breathing out, knowing that I'm breathing out, having that, being willing to cultivate that awareness in everything I do. Life becomes, what life has to show me through this process is sometimes just staggering, really staggering. I, I was supposed to be dead by the time I'm 25. That's right now. I wouldn't mind making it to 800. Life is just so interesting.
I would like to, before we have about 10 minutes, I'd love to tell all the ways people can get a hold of you, but I have so many more questions that we're not going to get to. But would you mind leading us through a 5-minute breathing meditation just to sort of show us, or at least, if not lead us through it, tell us how, whatever, take it away, however you want to do it.
What I'll do is, so every Thursday and every Saturday, we have a formal sitting and recitations online out of the Magnolia Zen Center, which is located in Mary Esther, Florida.
Okay.
Mary Esther is a small community that borders Fort Walton Beach. What I do in front of that is I give instructions on sitting. Meditation can't be taught. What I can do is I can give you the instructions on how to sit, and then that's what needs to be cultivated. Also on Sundays, also online, I do an open session of questions and responses, and then on Sunday evenings at 6 p.m. Central Time, I have a veterans gathering. We've been doing this online now since COVID for 2 years now. So when sitting, it doesn't matter if you sit on a chair or if you sit on a stool or if you sit on a cushion like I'm sitting now or directly on the floor. It doesn't matter what you sit on. Sit on the edge of the bed. It doesn't matter. What matters is our posture. So if someone is sitting on the edge of their bed or in a chair or on a stool, or what's important is to have 3 solid points of contact, a solid base of support. Those 3 points of contact, if we're sitting on something elevated, is our bottom and our feet. We want our feet flat on the floor. We want the knees not completely not tied together and not too wide, just comfortable. If they're sitting on a floor, on a meditation cushion or directly on the floor, then those 3 points of contact are bottom and knees. We want to get the knees down to the mat. Then all other aspect of posture applies. We sit, and here it's about cultivating an awareness of the body in space, to really recognize our relationship, to have a sense of the body, not a thought of it, to feel the interconnected reality that we are. So we sit with the back straight, not rigid, but straight. So we notice the natural curvature of the spine. Then we sit with the hips slightly forward. Bring the chin in just a bit. And then notice that the ears are aligned with the shoulder, the nose aligned with the navel. Now, in the lineage in which I'm ordained, we're taught to sit with our eyes mostly closed, not completely closed. However, that's not obligatory. If someone wants to sit with their eyes closed, it's quite okay. I just caution people, if they're sitting with their eyes closed, to be careful they don't fall asleep. Then when breathing, the way I was taught and the way I pass on to others is that we breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth. However, some people teach it differently. I'm not too fixed on it has to be one way or the other. What I do pass on is that when we breathe in, we do not follow the breath into the body, but rather pay attention to the precise point where the breath enters the body. And then when we breathe out, we don't follow the breath out of the body, but rather pay attention to the precise point where the breath leaves the body. Now, when breathing, often we're conditioned, or by habit, we cut the breath off at the diaphragm. We understand this because our chest expands, our shoulders rise.
Mhm.
We don't give the breath a chance to really nourish the body. So the way I was taught and what I pass on is that we breathe into the abdomen. Now, one does not have to follow the breath into the body to know we're breathing into the abdomen, because the stomach will expand.
Right.
It expands ever so slightly. And when breathing out, it contracts. Now, the hands. In the lineage I'm ordained, we are taught to place the back of the left hand into the palm of the right. And then we rest that on our thighs with our thumb tips nearly touching. Again, it's not obligatory to sit like this. This is just what was passed on to me in the lineage I'm ordained. What I encourage people who come to meditation retreats, who are not really keen on the lineage that I'm ordained in, is just find a comfortable position for your hands. I see a lot of people sit with their hands in this position. I know they've seen too many commercials. It's not so typical. In some yoga circles, people use this position. They call them mudras.
Right.
But really, just find a comfortable position for your hands, and then just really stay focused on the breath. Breathe in, knowing we're breathing in. Breathing out, knowing we're breathing out. And stay connected to the breath. What happens is I become aware. Breathing in, I know I'm breathing in. Breathing out, geez, I wonder what's for breakfast. Bam, just like that. I've lost contact with my breath. The moment I'm aware that I've lost contact with my breath, I just come back to the breath. And really, it took me years before I was able to stay, really stay connected with my breath in a way that I never imagined possible.
What do you think? Because you hear people, we hear it all the time. I meditate 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day. Is there a good? I mean, I know for me, when I first started doing meditations, I couldn't do it to 10, 20 minutes like some people, and I had to you kind of build up to it. But is there a magic number of what people need to be just connecting every day with?
No. What I routinely say to people, it doesn't matter how long you sit. What matters is the intention that you bring when you sit, so that I'm sitting with my full intention just to sit. What I do before the sessions of questions and responses, before the veterans group, I give instructions like I've done here, and we sit for 10 cycles of breath. It's about bringing one's full attention. I think meditate, this sitting in silent, this silent sitting stuff, people can also become quite addicted to that. They're seeking for some kind of mood or some kind of sensation, or they're seeking for something, and that's not the point of this practice. The point of this practice is to wake up, and to do that, I need to be willing to recognize what it is that's distracting me constantly from an active relation with my breath. So no, it doesn't matter how long you sit. It matters the intention with which you bring to the place where you're sitting.
So you're not seeking escape, you're seeking to wake up.
Well, let's hope so. That is the intention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, that makes sense to me. One thing thank you for doing that. And it always, another thing this is a really, well, there are no silly questions, but it's going to seem really silly. Why is the breath so important?
It's the foundation of life. It's the most important. It's the very foundation of life. It doesn't matter what we think, believe, or say. In Buddhist practice, they talk about the coexistence of two realms, the relative and the absolute realm. And the relative realm is the realm of right, wrong, yes, no, good, bad. The absolute realm is the realm of truth, not the truth that exists in the relative in the relative realm because there are 10,000 versions of truth. We see that happening all the time around us. All of them are correct, and also all of them are incorrect. Now, the truth that exists in the absolute realm. People can believe that the foundation of life, they can believe it to be whatever it is. But I will share with you this, that regardless of what one believes, let's say we talk about gravity. So people can have all kinds of concepts or ideas about gravity that they want. But if you go up to the 16th floor, go out on the roof, go to the edge of the building, and you step off, the truth of gravity is going to show itself. It doesn't matter what we believe, the truth. So breath really is the foundation of life, because if I were to cover your nose and mouth so you couldn't breathe, you would understand. Then there is this practical understanding that yes, the breath is the foundation of life.
I wanted to just throw out another chapter, and again, there's 108 of these very practical chapters. 29, stop blaming others. We can, and I quote, "We can't make the external world become peaceful. We can only become peace. This is the only way." And I thought that was beautiful, because there's so much now in the world where it feels like we're trying so hard to make everyone, I know I do, let's all be peaceful, let's all get along. And I'll read it again. We can't make the external world become peaceful. We can only become peace. This is the only way. And it goes on to say there is so much trauma and sadness in the world, so much suffering. We need to be willing to look at it and how we are responsible, how we contribute to this cycle. When we stop blaming others and begin to look deeply within ourselves, we can discover how suffering arises, how it is linked to violence, and how to stop the seemingly endless cycles of aggression. I really like that chapter.
Yeah, well, it's true in my life.
Yeah.
And however, when I write, we need to be peace. In order to do that, I had to give up my ideas about what peace was, and I had to be willing to just sit down, invite more stillness in my life, and not turn away from that which I was taught to define as uncomfortable. I had to not turn away, and as I became more intimately connected, or I became more intimately aware of the gross and subtle manifestations of what I generically call suffering, my relationship with it began to change. It doesn't go away, but my relationship began to change.
Right.
In some of the public talks that I do, I will speak 30 to 40 minutes. And then I open it up to the group. They can ask me any question they want. I open myself wide to them. Nothing is out of bounds. I don't argue. I don't debate. They ask, I respond, end. That's it. But what I will often say to people at that time is that if we want the world to be different, we have to live differently. It's not about changing the world. But I'm not talking about living in a cave now. And I am socially active. I'm in the world.
Right.
But my intention, what I've learned by being in the world the way in which I am, is that my interactions with the realities that I'm encountering in the world give me insight into myself, so that I'm able to become more conscious of that which doesn't serve me, that which creates separation and doesn't invite interconnectedness. I don't have to agree with the people I'm interacting with, but I do find those. I always need to look, where am I connected? Where am I like them? Where am I? That's where I look for connection.
Right. Well, I would like to read, and Roger, if you want to help me, a few of the places everyone can get involved.
Oh, okay.
And first of all, you can get Claude AnShin's book. I highly recommend it for everyone. Bringing Meditation to Life. This book right here. It's really, really wonderful. And then use it and practice, and that's my challenge to myself too. And but it's a wonderful book. And also, as Claude AnShin mentioned, there are meditation practices online. I want to make sure I say this right. It's info at, and I'm going to spell it. It's ZALTHO.org. Is that Zaltho? Or is that a
Zaltho.
Zaltho?
Zaltho.org.
Okay. So it's ZALTHO.org. And then also the book, which I'm sure you can find there and all over Barnes and Noble, and just all your small bookstores, your big bookstores, Amazon. I got mine on Amazon. I can tell you guys that. And then Roger, you want to pick up with the veterans that he already.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So also you have the veterans meeting you were talking about on Sunday evenings. You can get contact
correct.
information there at info@zaltho.org, and that's info@zaltho.org. And then you have Facebook and Instagram. Instagram, I see a Zaltho Foundation.
Yes.
And Facebook is also Zaltho Foundation, and you have a podcast, it's Zaltho Live, correct?
That's correct.
Oh.
Now that the meetings, the veterans gathering, and the formal sitting and recitations on Thursdays and Saturdays, and the questions and responses open to the general public on Sundays. These are Zoom offerings, and the Zoom dial-up information can be found on the Zaltho Foundation website, and that's zaltho.org.
Okay.
Very good.
So everything can be found there. So we want to
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. We've looked forward to this, and I again highly encourage everybody to get involved. Especially, I know people that, like I said, that I have contacted to say that have struggled after several wars lately and with the PTSD. And I know you talk about that too. And you even say, I don't want to misquote you with such little time left, but even that PTSD doesn't even describe it fully, what some people go through. And I know with my friends it doesn't. Do you have something to say real quickly on that? You were even describing going in the grocery stores, and like you'd look at a can and you knew, and realistically that can wasn't going to explode, but yet at the same time you might be afraid that, and I've seen that with friends of mine and things that they go through. And so I think that I would encourage just anybody, it's not, we're not going to get rid of our suffering, but at least learn to live a practice of accepting and walking through our suffering. I always say learning to walk with things in my life and look at my fears in the face because I have a tendency to want to run from them. So the book was really, really got me. In every chapter, you got me. It's like, okay, I'm telling Michelle exactly. Yeah, I see you, Michelle. You need to not try to run from it. So, because I do have a tendency to do that. So
We hadn't noticed here. Wait.
because that's you ding it every time I admit something, right? No, you know that's true. So thank you so much, Roger. Do you want to?
You're welcome.
Yeah.
One of
Thank
the
you.
things that I would like to say, though, is
Yeah.
I always encourage people to take the D out of PTSD because we are not disordered.
That is what you said, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Take the D out of post-traumatic stress disorder because we are not disordered. The way we respond to the world makes absolute sense based on the reality of our experiences.
Oh, absolutely. And from what I read in that book, that first book, absolutely. And I guess for everybody. But thank you for saying that. You know,
You're welcome.
I just read recently, well, I don't know if I'm going to say that, but something about committing suicide. That's another thing people are saying, that's another thing that there's so much stigma to that. You can say they died by suicide. I don't know if you'll agree with that or not, but they committed suicide. There's so much stigma, but I agree with that. PTSD, it's like you're not disordered. It's a very natural response to what you went through,
Right.
especially the people who've been in more, but also in their domestic violence. I work a lot with Claude AnShin. I've worked, volunteered for over 20, now it's 30 years with domestic violence, and that's a war zone for many. And so same thing. I would take the D out of that too. So thank you so much for being here. Matt, I'm sorry I didn't ask you any questions tonight and bring
It's
you
quite
in.
all right. I didn't need to be asked any questions.
But we're glad you're here, and we appreciate you as always. Thank you for being here too. Well, we will say goodnight to everyone tonight, and make sure that you get a hold of Claude AnShin at you want to say that again, Roger?
It's Zaltho.org. It's
Yeah.
ZALTHO.org.
And go ahead. And so thanks, everybody, and we will see you next Tuesday night. Thanks,
Thank
everyone,
you.
for being here.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
Yes.
Thanks for listening to SoulWhat, a Soultopia production. If you're intrigued, searching, or looking to schedule a reading of your very own, visit us in sunny Dallas, Texas, or visit us online at facebook.com/Soultopia Holistic Boutique. And if you like what you heard, subscribe, rate, and review on your favorite podcasting platform to be the first to hear new episodes every Tuesday at 7:30 Central.